Good late morning, everyone, and welcome to the OBX Wave Report for January the 5th, 2023. And I greet you from another beautiful morning here in the Outer Banks. There is sun shining down. We've got some clouds rolling on by, but it's not enough to disturb the idyllic weather that we've been experiencing for now the past week with temperatures in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, in some cases unseasonably warm. We did have a front sweep through yesterday, bringing with it some thunderstorms and some unsettled weather. And now conditions have cooled off a little bit. Also, we've seen the waves drop down a bit on the north-facing beaches while the swell has maintained for the south-facing beaches. So let's get into it for the OBX wave report for this morning, where we discuss all things waves, weather, climate, and beach lifestyle. And for our daily reports here, we're going to focus more on weather and wave conditions for the Outer Banks. And I do have a couple of special reports for you on conditions for North America and parts of the North Atlantic, to include, in this case, Ireland and the United Kingdom, which is predicted to experience some very stormy conditions over the next few days as well. And we'll also get down to the beaches for a local observation, and maybe later on tonight we'll get a special together. I want to do a historic special on a historic location here in the Outer Banks, and that's related to the flight history of the Outer Banks. And I believe it has a kind of parallel for both climate action and the trouble that we experienced on January 6th. And as we're coming in to the January 6th anniversary, I wanted to highlight a few things related, I believe, contextually to January 6th, or at least in the context of a struggle that is ongoing between action and what I would term as action and enlightenment to defend both the livelihoods and the rights of the people in general, as in a kind of we the people, not just here in the United States, but around the world. And it is my opinion that climate action fits into that. I think that the more cynical and stick in the mudish and reactive and fearful we are, and the more we tend to freeze, the more we will tend to see worsening impacts from climate change. And I believe concordantly in a parallel kind of track, the more threats we will tend to see to democracy, because both our life support systems and the health of our environment require action and engagement in a moral state of mind for doing the right thing, not just for yourself, but for all the people, for we the people. And that requires responsibility. It requires forward looking. It requires an ability to learn and grow. And it also requires a trust in learning and in a way a kind of, a scientific process of continuing to learn and grow and improve our understanding of how we can act and become more sustainable. And I believe that the maintenance of democracy requires a similar form of action and enlightenment. It requires a adherence to facts, be it scientific or otherwise, a commitment to doing the moral thing based on those facts, the moral thing being not just having power systems in place that serve the few, or those who hoard, or those who are greedy, or those who just want more and more power, but instead projects power and responsibility onto a broader segment of the population and calls them to participate in governance, which in and of itself is a process of of working together to both defend and improve our civilization, our nation, our local cities and local governments, and and the world itself, because we are a global civilization. So I know that sounds really big, but I think that it's connected. I believe that it's all connected, and I like to talk about that and talk about that struggle between wanting to cling to something that is perceived as old and mystical and good, but has become more of kind of just a culturally harmful thing and resistance to changing in a positive kind of way. As we get into the anniversary of January 6th, which was a terrible event in which a would-be tyrant attempted to topple our democracy through a first an assault of lies on our political system, and then an assault of violent action against the process of the peaceful transfer of power in the United States, which for our nation is a sacred thing. It's one of the cornerstones of why we exist as a nation and why we have grown so much as a nation over time to become a better, more moral force in the world to bend, as Martin Luther King says, the arc of the moral universe to justice. And I know I've really gotten a little bit off the OBX wave report here, but there are some local there's some local historical pieces that I think kind of fit into this larger context, and I'm going to provide for you some of that context later on today. So thank you for joining me for the OBX Wave Report. Let's get into waves. And so right now we're looking at the satellite picture for the eastern United States provided by the good scientists over at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Thank you, NOAA, for all the good work that you do and in providing so many good services to the people of the United States, both for enlightenment, understanding, and for our health and safety. And right now, the frontal system is sweeping out. We have partly cloudy to mostly sunny conditions prevailing here, and the remnant clouds are expected to sweep out as we get more into the clear and the front moves offshore. Looking at the infrared satellite picture, we do see the front moving offshore with a thin layer of clouds trailing behind. We also see a low pressure system swirling over the Great Lakes. Right now, for today at least, this is not that low is not going to impact us that much, other than by bringing in some westerly winds and some cooler conditions than yesterday and the day before, although it's still expected to reach a high in the lower 60s here in Manio and out by Jeanette's Pier. Out west, we have a very powerful storm system that is bringing extreme rainfall, strong winds, high surf, landslides, flooding, all kinds of terrible, well, all kinds of extreme impacts to California and western states, particularly California, which has now declared a state of emergency. I am going to get into the California storm and the progression of storms that is expected to continue to hit California a bit later in a special report, but it is worth noting that there is a very powerful storm system here out west. And my thoughts go out to everyone out in California. Please listen to your local government, your local emergency management, and stay tuned to your weather experts from the National Weather Service on to keep abreast of events as they develop. Moving back to the Outer Banks and looking more closely at the swell condition in the near offshore environment, waves are in the range of 4.5 feet to 5 feet for the south-facing beaches as a southerly swell sweeps in. And that southerly swell is angling more and more offshore for the north-facing beaches with offshore swells in the range of 3 feet. We're not seeing anything in the way of 3-foot waves on the northern beaches today. It's mostly very flat or very small. Looking in at some of our local conditions, I'm going to start out at Jeanette's Pier, and then we're going to go on south. We're going to go on back south to Billy Mitchell. I've got a focus on Billy Mitchell because I want to talk about some history for the Billy Mitchell Airport and um, the some of the flight development in the Outer Banks as a kind of pioneer in flight. But first, starting out at Jeanette's Pier, the wave conditions there at present are 1 to 2 feet. So we have 1 to 2 foot waves at Jeanette's Pier with a primary swell coming in at 8 seconds and a secondary swell coming in at 6 seconds. Winds are out of the west-southwest at 10 miles per hour, and that's offshore. So you got an offshore wind encountering the swell coming in, wrapping in from the south and east when it does wrap in, but this is pretty small conditions. If you're going to go out today, I would recommend a strong paddle board for catching those waves because they're going to be a little bit more difficult to catch given both the offshore flow and the smaller wave heights. Air temperatures right now are in the range of the upper 50s to around 60. Ocean water temperatures are 54 degrees Fahrenheit at Jeanette's Pier, so cold conditions in the water, you're going to want to have your 3-4 millimeter wetsuit, your booties and gloves, and probably a hood of some variety. The weather conditions at Jeanette's Pier right now are partly cloudy with an expected high today of 52 degrees Fahrenheit. Moving on down the coastline, we're going to pass Oregon Inlet and Rodanthony or Rodanth. People say it differently here. And so I'm guilty of the same. On past Avon, which is a beautiful beach, went surfing there a few days ago, and down to Buxton, where waves are 2 to 3 feet as that south swell wraps around. These 2 to 3 foot waves are coming in at a primary period of 8 seconds with a secondary period of 7 seconds. Winds are out of the west with a slight northerly component, but almost due west. And these winds are running offshore, and so that's helping to hollow out the swells and slow down the swells a little bit. The air temperature is 63 degrees Fahrenheit at Buxton, and the ocean water temperature matches. This is a little bit cooler, so inching down into the lower 60s here at Buxton. Weather conditions are mostly sunny with those 2 to 3 foot waves coming in, and the expected high today is 65 degrees Fahrenheit. Again, you're going to want your cold water protection, at least a 2-3 millimeter wetsuit, and you're probably going to want gloves and booties at least to keep your hands and feet warm. Although you could, if you're resilient to the cold, you could probably jump in and deal with a little coldness in your hands and feet if you're resilient to that kind of thing. And then moving on west, taking the Route 12, turning right at Buxton and moving on to Billy Mitchell Airport here, just to the east of Frisco, north and east of Frisco. Wave conditions are 3 to 4 feet. So the bigger wave conditions are on the south-facing beaches. It is worth noting that I went up to Avalon Pier yesterday to get a little observation for you guys. I did take a video, but then I just decided not to post it because the waves were basically flat there. It looked like a bay. The waves were maybe about yay big. And so it was really nothing too notable, although I guess I'm going to have flat conditions to report on. So eventually I'm probably going to have to post a video of some flat waves, although not yesterday. So right now, though, at Billy Mitchell, and this does provide the contrast between north and south with Avalon Pier looking pretty darn flat. And then south here, we've got 3 to 4 foot waves. So if you want to go chase some waves, you can go down to Buxton and then, locations further south. So at Billy Mitchell, yeah, those waves are coming in at 3 to 4 feet, which is pretty substantial. Swell is coming in out of the south with a 7-second primary swell and an 8-second secondary swell. Winds are out of the west, out of the due west at 12 miles per hour, which provides a cross-shore wind here at Billy Mitchell Airport Beach. Air temperatures are 62 degrees Fahrenheit, ocean water at 64, so about the same as Buxton down here at Billy Mitchell, with those southerly swell and winds from the past couple of days probably pushing in some warmer waters there. It is presently, weather conditions are mostly sunny at Billy Mitchell with an expected high temperature today of 65 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's our general roundup of locations and surf conditions for 3 select locations across the Outer Banks. If you want to find out more about wave conditions in the Outer Banks, I recommend you check out magicseaweed.com. They're an excellent resource for wave conditions across the Outer Banks and across the world as well. Pulling back out to a larger weather picture, I did want to show you the national, I believe that, I'm sorry, the storm prediction, National Weather Service's Climate Prediction Center's 8 to 14 day outlook for the larger United States and the Outer Banks specifically. For temperatures, we're expecting to see above average temperature conditions in this region, relatively above average temperatures. And it is worth noting that well above average temperatures are expected to dominate for the central US. And that's something we might want to keep an eye on here, because this abnormal warmth might generate some weather headlines. It's just something to keep an eye on. We have had a range of extreme weather conditions in the US and globally, this associated with climate change driven by fossil fuel burning. And unfortunately, right now, we we're in a situation where we have a clear need to tamp down the impacts of worsening extreme weather and other related climate impacts like sea level rise. And the conditions as we are getting into the 1.2, maybe 1.3 degrees Celsius above 1880s temperatures ranges is starting to create like a more unstable, more unsettled global climate with more extremes in the form of rainfall, precipitation events, and drought, as well as many locations that are experiencing stormier conditions due to added energy in the climate system, often in the form of increased ocean temperatures and increased evaporation off of land surfaces that increases convection, as well as instances where the jet stream has been altered to create more blocking patterns or more persistent weather patterns where you get long-term drought and heat waves in some regions and long-term storm and flooding in other regions. So yeah, so just as we look at these conditions, it's just important to take these climate change features into account. And I'm just providing a very broad summary of these conditions from a report standpoint. If you want to check out some of the experts on climate, I would definitely go off to Twitter and check out Dr. Michael Mann, Professor Catherine Hayhoe, um, Stefan Ramstorff, and Terry Hughes, and these are just a few of them. There are many, many. Oh, hold on, one more. Daniel Swain, in particular, also produces some amazing reports, in my opinion, on particularly weather conditions for the U.S. West. He's recently been talking about a potential for atmospheric rivers to impact the U.S. West Coast and generate very extreme conditions. So I would, if you're interested in the underlying climate patterns that may be contributing to the atmospheric rivers that we are seeing out west now, I would take a look at Daniel Swain's climate related research and his understanding and developing understanding of climatology out for particularly the U.S. West. It is very informative. It's very helpful, and it does help to provide. Um, it helps to grant a context of these changes that we're seeing that some people are calling the new normal. I don't really much care for the term new normal. It makes it seem too normal. It's not normal. Although I don't want to also get in the business of scaring people. I don't know. If we start to get too much into superlatives and freaky things, it tends to inject too much fear. So like we need to be focused more on action and positivity and how we can both protect the climate system and make a better future for everyone. But looking at the climate science, it gives us what we need to know moving forward. So that's one of the reasons why I'm mentioning these top scientists that are absolutely must follows. And if you are a reporter, I urge you to please call them for interviews, ask them questions. They are fantastic informers that, in my opinion, communicate well to the public and provide the messaging that we need to hear. So yeah, okay. I've done a lot of little talks about these kinds of things in this wave report, but okay. Looking at the precipitation outlook for the United States as a whole for the 8 to 14 day time frame from the Climate Prediction Center, we continue to see this tendency for California just to get slammed with storm after storm after storm. And this is in relationship to an atmospheric river over which storms just keep riding and running into California. We had a major storm event occur over the past day, which is ongoing for today. And this particular major storm is just one storm in a progression of storms. And I'm going to talk more about this in a special report. But it is worth noting that most of the United States does see a tendency for more stormy than normal conditions, with a hot spot definitely being California for now. Looking at the larger climate picture, I'm sorry, the larger weather picture, we see this progression of storms sweeping in toward the US West Coast. What's been happening a lot of times is these storms will come in toward the US West Coast and start to recurve. Some of them will leap over the mountains and then progress across the rest of the United States. But it's interesting to watch some of these storms recurve. And I'll go ahead and run the model here a little bit because we have the main storm that impacted California yesterday and has lingering impacts today, sweeping up toward Canada and just kind of getting devoured by the next low that sweeps in. So not progressing across the Rockies, although I guess some of the moisture impulse does wash over and provide some impetus for this next low pressure system to form in the central US. And then we have another storm system that sweeps in, delivers its moisture to California and the US West Coast, and then also recurves before getting absorbed by the next system, which then recurves or lingers and hits California and the US West Coast again and lingers before kind of inching on into Canada. And then finally, in the global forecast system model, we get a portion of this impulse leaping over the Rockies and getting into the central US, and then tracking eastward as it taps some Gulf moisture to create some severe weather for the central US. So just a pattern to note for the US West Coast. Um, it's worth noting this for the Outer Banks because it does affect our weather. If we're getting more of the storm track moving across the US directly, it'll tend to be stormier here. And right now, the storm track is just kind of spending most of its energy on the West Coast. And a lot of the energy is recurving, and some of it splashes up over the Rockies to form these follow-on storm systems that tap the Gulf moisture and Atlantic moisture and spin up. But the main event here is for the West Coast. And so for now, the Outer Banks appears to be protected, or I don't know if that's the right word, but out of the extreme weather pattern for the most part. I do also want to note that the storm system that is predicted for Ireland and the UK is now sweeping out of Baffin Bay. and is projected to, by Friday, bomb out into a looks like 941. Yeah, lower 940s millibar system before sweeping in to Ireland and the UK on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday with strong gale force conditions, heavy rains. I was looking at some Ireland weather forecasts, hail, and just generally squally conditions. From the standpoint of the OBX wave report, we've been focusing in on the very high surf predicted for Ireland. It's kind of nuts, some of the what the models are saying, and I'd really like to see what some on the ground reports yield for wave conditions in Ireland over the next 3 days. All right, so we're going to end this wave report with a larger look at the North Atlantic wave conditions. The near coastal conditions are pretty calm for the Outer Banks, and we've been, I guess, enjoying. I don't know if that's exactly the right word, but we've been enjoying calmer conditions here for the Outer Banks generally than much of the North Atlantic, which has tended to be stormier and rougher with significant wave heights in the range of 10 to 20 feet in a lot of locations. And I'm going to go ahead and advance the model here just to show you the storm that is still predicted to sweep out of Baffin Bay and head on toward Ireland and the UK. And I will talk specifically about that in a couple of follow-on episodes shortly. So thank you for joining me again. And please remember to do everything you can to help save our beautiful coastlines from the impacts of climate change driven by fossil fuel burning. The main action that we need to focus on right now is a rapid transition to clean energy and a drawdown of excess carbon from the atmosphere by moving to a more sustainable system. It is totally doable. It is something that we can do. Don't listen to the naysayers. Don't listen to the doomers and those who hate on hope. We love hope here. We love action, and we live in it. We thrive in it. We stepped out here right onto the edge. I stepped out here right onto the edge because I have hope. You don't fight the troubles from the rear. You fight the troubles from the front. So me coming here in large part was to fight from the front, and I'm not going to shut up about it. I'm going to keep hoping. I'm going to keep asking people to act, and I'm going to keep doing my best to act as well. So thank you for joining me again, and I will be back with you shortly.